Hi, and welcome back to Popcorn and Slush movie review with me, JOC. Today, we will be reviewing a really special movie. This movie is called Soul. It's by Disney Pixar. This movie was dropped in 2020. The other day, I just so happened to watch the trailer for this movie, just trying to find movies to watch, trying to find movies with meaning. And I watched the trailer and I was just sold on this movie. But the biggest question I have is this movie for kids or is this movie for adults? Because I got so many messages about just life in general from this movie, and I just want to share it with people. I just want to share it because I feel like every single adult out there who's even searching for understanding, searching for passion, for purpose, for that spark, should definitely take a look and watch this movie, because this movie is definitely not for kids. It's for adults, and it's calling us. It's calling us to look at our lives to see if we're living our life to the fullest or if we're just existing. So let's talk about the movie Soul by Disney Pixar. All right, so the movie opens up with Joe Gardner. Joe Gardner is played by Jamie Foxx, and he did a really good job playing this. As we know, Jamie Foxx is a comedian. He is a songwriter. He's a really good singer, and he plays the piano as well. So this kind of fit into the idea of what Jamie Foxx would play. The character is a band teacher in New York City at MS 75, and so he's teaching students, but his love for jazz is just something that he's so passionate about, and he wants his students who are in the band to be as passionate about it as well. On one scene, he's just listening to the students play and they're just really struggling, but he has one student who plays the trombone, and she kills it. She has a spark about her instrument, and he sees that spark in her. But he wants to show the class how music has inspired him when he was their age. So he gets on the piano and he starts playing that piano. And when I say I got mesmerized, I just sat there and was like, wow. And if you think about it, it's a cartoon. But when you see him move his fingers on the keys and when you see him play the music, it was just like, okay, I can see how music can be so impactful and so powerful, and take you to a different place and put you in a different feeling, because when he played those notes, it just relaxed you and made you feel really good. But pretty much his story was his dad took him to a jazz club when he was really young. He didn't want to go, but at that point, that's where he got his love for jazz, his love for playing the piano. When he starts to play the piano, he gets into the zone to where he just zones out and just becomes a totally different person, but he's just serene. He's in his happy place. So Joe Gardner is really, it feels like his whole life he has aspired to be a jazz musician, but he's never caught a break. He's never been able to reach those heights and those pinnacles that he ideally thinks that he wants to reach. He just goes through life trying to get gig after gig and just has been turned down over and over again, until this one day, one of his older students who he taught how to play drums calls him to be a piano player for one of the top jazz players, Miss Doretha, I think was her name, and she was a saxophonist. And he gets a call to audition to be in her band. So he goes to the audition and he nails it, kills it. He has the opportunity to play with the band. Another interesting relationship is a relationship he has with his mom, who she loves stability, and his father was also a musician, and she saw what it did to him, so she doesn't view being a musician as how Joe feels. And so he goes to his mom for guidance, or he goes to her to just let her know he also got a job as being the full-time band director, the teacher. But she's happy about that, but she's not happy that he's still out here trying to be in this gig life. But for him, he got the biggest gig of his life, so he's super excited. But the thing that was interesting to me, and I feel like I saw this before in another movie, where and to avoid death. what is it called, Final Destination, to where everybody was on the bus and then everybody died in a certain order, but somebody skipped death, so death had to come back around. So to me, in this movie, that was kind of like how it was, to where when Joe Gardner finally got his gig and he left there, he was on the phone, like, I forget who he was talking to, but he was on the phone talking to somebody. But each place he go, he could have died so many times, but the only thing that took him out was falling down the manhole. Weird as all get out, but he fell down a manhole and now he was in the hospital. But because of that, in that instance, he ended up where his soul left his body, and he ended up on this conveyor belt thing that looked like it was going into pretty much the light. If you ever seen Poltergeist, Carol Ann, don't go into the light. He met these older women who were telling him like, hey, you've made it. And he like, I can't die. I just got the gig of my life. I can't die. So it kind of reminded me of like a bug zapper, because they were just going into this light and getting zapped, and it was making like a zap sound, but they called it the great beyond, to where pretty much for anyone who's religious or anything like that, you would assume that, okay, you're going to heaven. But it's a children's movie, so they call it the great beyond. From there, he's running. He's like, I can't die. I finally got my opportunity. And he falls, he breaks through like the barrier, and he falls into what they like to call, I guess that would be called the great beyond. It kind of made me think about like, what would a soul look like? Because how the animators kind of made soul look was like just a blue figure that kind of looked like the person, but it was blue. And I'm like, you never really think about, like, when you go to church and do certain things like that, you don't think about like, wow, what would a soul really look like? Have you even imagined what it could look like? Not really. But those are kind of like two questions I had when looking at this scene. And he breaks out of the great beyond, and from there he falls into what is called great before. And there it seems like that's where innocence begins. That's where as a child you are just the most innocent, the most curious, you don't know much of anything, and you haven't even got to start your life. So pretty much these are souls who haven't even started life, and their goal is to potentially get on earth. But this scene was pretty interesting because they had these spirits called Jerrys. Everybody was called Jerry, and these Jerrys pretty much ran the great before. And so in this area, it was small souls, and they were all given these personalities. So it was so interesting because it's like different personalities was like, okay, we're going to take you guys and be aloof. We're going to take you guys and be rambunctious. We're going to take you guys to be very curious. And on their chest they had these, it was 6 circles, and the 6th circle was always left open because that circle would indicate the spark that you were supposed to get. But the other personality traits, I'm like, this is getting real deep, because this is when it dawned on me that this movie wasn't for kids, when they started talking about personality traits. Because the traits that they was talking about, I'm like, so now we got narcissism, like this is real deep right here. It also it brought up another question that I had. Would a child seem to think like, wow, this is where I get my personality traits from, versus it just being the personality coming from your environment or the things you've experienced? Would it just be something that, you know, you were given at birth, like these personality traits? And hopefully these personality traits are stuff that you have gotten from your environment, because some of these personality traits, I'm like, when Mr. Joe Gardner was there, what he learned is that at some point, once the souls are ready, they would have to jump off this like little cliff into the universe and fly into the earth, where they would finally meet their human body and find their soul. So at that point, Joe, he was found by one of the Jerrys, and pretty much they thought that he was one of the trainers who had gotten loose and needed to get back to the trainers. So pretty much the trainers were a group of people who already lived their life on earth, and now they were able to to help new souls find their spark. And initially when they started to talk about this spark, I assumed that the spark was like your purpose in life. But it's really just something that you're ultimately really passionate about. They put Mr. Gardner in like a training orientation where they kind of explained to him what a trainer was and what the trainer would be about, as well as they started to pair them with their new soul. But in the orientation, like, they gave a description of like one of the personalities of the children that the trainers will be paired with. This little soul said, I am manipulative, a Manglo narcissist with intensive opportunistic ability. I'm like, now y'all know this ain't no kid movie, right? Like, and those features were so deep to where I'm like, wow. And y'all know it's some people walking around with them same personality traits going on. So now, after watching this movie, I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on. At this point, they start to pair the trainers with the new souls. And they assumed that Joe was somebody totally different. He was like a child psychologist who helped so many people. And it seemed like in order to be the trainer, you had to be someone who did great things on earth. You would have had to live a very inspirational life. Like, they had Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, people in history who were there. So Joe ends up being paired with Soul 22. And this soul, if you think about it, is billions and billions of people in this world. So that means it's billions and billions of soul. But this is Soul 22. So what that means is this soul has been there for a very, very long time, because they're pairing souls up. Well, their number is a billion and billion. And this is soul number 22. This soul has had so many trainers, but yet could never, ever find that spark. Never, ever find that meaning on what it meant for them to go to earth. Joe came up with the idea to where he's like, okay, I'm going to help this soul find their spark. And because of that, I'm going to be able to go back to earth. But when he got paired with Soul 22, it became more evident to him that maybe that idea wasn't going to happen, because this soul just was not feeling it. This soul could not do it. Once the trainers were able to help the new souls find their spark, then that circle on their chest would fill and it would turn to the earth, and then they would be ready to go to the earth to start their life. After this, they were paired, and Soul 22 took them to the area to where kind of like they can look at different aspects, different sparks that they can have. Joe told the soul, like, I'm not really a trainer, I just got here by accident. So once Soul was able to see Joe's life and see how sad it was, and Joe saw his own life, and he started to look to see like, wow, it was actually sadder than I thought. Like, he thought he was living his life, but just looking at how he ate alone, how he did so many things alone, how he really didn't get to experience much of anything, it made Soul 22 sad. Like, is this what it's like on earth? And Soul 22, let's just talk about this soul. This soul seemed to be very, very jaded. It seemed to know a lot more than what it should have known, because this classic line that this soul hit us with, I said, ooh, again, this not no child movie. One of the lines was a building had fell on like a whole bunch of souls. And so Joe says to Soul 22, like, oh, I hope they're okay. And Soul 22 says, or no, the line is really, you cannot crush a soul here. That's what earth is for. I mean, you could spend a whole lot of time breaking that down. I'm not going to try to break it down. I just feel like that was a really, really classic line, to where the people who wrote this movie, they was throwing out little ducats, little pieces of information left and right. I mean, this movie is definitely for adults. Like I said, this Soul 22 had a lot of insight, a lot of like, it was like the innocence and the curiosity of a child, but it was also this child seeing it for what it was. Whereas a lot of times as adults, we tend to like mask things and not see that they're there when they're clearly there in our eyes and it's evident. Joe Gardner and Soul 22 go to the Hall of Inspiration, where there the trainers are to expose the new souls to different sparks that might intrigue them or that might inspire them to whatever it is that they're going to be passionate about in their life. So it could be basketball, it could be eating food, it can be cooking. It was just so many things, and pretty much everything that Joe exposed Soul 22 to, Soul 22 was like, not gonna do it, don't like it, move on. It's not happening. At that point, once Soul 22 and Joe came out of the Hall of Inspiration, Jared was waiting there, and Jared was like, oh, well, I guess nothing happened. Let's move on, and told Joe he had to go to the great beyond. So that's when Soul 22 decided to help Joe out, because he saw how sad his life was on Earth, to where he's like, okay, I need to help you out. Let's see, we can help each other out, or at least help him get back to Earth. Like in the scene where they were in the Hall of Inspiration, it kind of, a question popped in my head, like, hey, what are the things that each one of us is inspired about and interested in to do, and where that spark came from? Like, it's each one of us has something in us that we are inspired about, that motivates us, that brings us passion and brings us joy, to where it doesn't matter what we're doing or how we're doing it, we are inspired by it. I just thought that was really cool to think about all the different things that you're good at, that can possibly be the spark that makes you unique and makes you who you are. So next up, Soul 22 decides to help Joe get back to Earth. So he takes him down into like one of these underground areas, because think about it, Soul 22 has been in this area in the Great Before for a very, very long time. So he knows all the little nooks and crannies, the little places to hide out and things like that. So he takes Joe to an area called the Zone, and it's the area to where when you're doing your spark or something that you're passionate about and you love, and you just get into the zone to where you hear nothing, you see nothing, all you're doing is what you enjoy, and you forget anybody is around. So pretty much the zone was like in the opening scene when Joe was playing the piano and he was just zoned out. I mean, we use that saying all the time, I'm just zoned in, zoned out, or whatever it is we're doing. So it was all these little bubbles of different souls being in the zone, whether that being singing, cooking, playing an instrument. And it was interesting because Soul 22, the jadedness that Soul 22 was, she started throwing like little balls at the people in the zones, and these souls were people actually on Earth, but their soul was just in the zone. So when she would bust their bubble that they were on, the feeling that they had would just go away. So it was like one soul was playing basketball. She threw the little rock and it bust the bubble, and that person couldn't make the shot anymore. Or someone was acting and they were in the zone and doing a great job, and then all of a sudden they couldn't remember their lines. So it was just an area to where people could just instantly be in the zone. Well, also in this area was the area to where lost souls were found. So pretty much, if you can imagine, if you haven't seen the movie, at the top in the sky there were souls who were in the zone, in their craft, in their passion, and they were just in the zone doing what they love. And then down below it was dark, and it was like monster kind of looking creatures that were all black, and these were called the lost souls. These lost souls were people who had just like this right here, this is the message. And what it was pretty much Soul 22 took Joe there to meet someone who could help him get back to Earth. And this soul was called Moon Landing. And pretty much Moon Landing had this really cool ship that would go around and help save lost souls. When he met Moon Landing told him something about what it means to be a lost soul. And this was the key right here. He said, a lost soul is when you cannot let go of your anxiety and oppressions, leaving them lost and disconnected from life. I just had to pause the movie at that point, because so many times in life we become disconnected from life, and you never think about it as it being like a lost soul. Like, your soul is so, it brings you so much joy, it gives you the person that you are. And when you get so defeated, so stressed, so anxious about everything else in life, you can't even enjoy it. You become disconnected from it, and you're not living anymore. You're just doing your day-to-day life, just trying to make it through every day, and just waking up trying to go do it over and over and over again, but not really experiencing anything. And I thought that was like, that hit me with message. If y'all ever seen Don't Be a Menace to Society While Drinking Juice in the Hood, if you watch the opening scene and they like message, that was a message right there. And that's what I'm saying. This movie has so many different messages, and this was just one of so many. Pretty much Moon Landing tells him about the lost souls and how they collect the lost soul, pretty much bring them back to center, bring them back to oneness. And thinking about just in life is so many different outlets that we have to where, what in my life can I do to bring me back to wholeness, to bring me back to joyfulness, happiness, living life. And so Moon Landing and his other people that were in his crew, they would help these souls get back to wholeness. And then at that point, the soul would pop back into that person. And it was interesting because the person that they had, the lost soul they found, was like a stockbroker or something. And you could see he was run down. He was stressed with life. He was just coexisting. He didn't really care. But when his soul came back, once it came back to that oneness, he woke up and he was like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I just existing? Why am I just doing this just to do it? And that epiphany is so powerful because for a lot of us, we consistently do the same thing over and over, thinking that it's going to be a different result. And then we get so comfortable in that whole living and coexisting that we never really pursue our passions, pursue our joys, pursue what really gives us life. You know, and once that soul came back in him and he realized like, wow, it's so much more that I could do. That's powerful. I'm like, this movie, this for adults. That's it. And as they rode through on Moon Landing's boat, they just saw a field of just so many lost souls, so many people out there who are lost. And just in general, how even yourself or just people you know who are just like, they have so much creativity, so many ideas, but they never push them to a point to where they can get it done. Because one, they don't believe in themselves, the worthiness of them. And then two, just how lost we are in this world. And social media doesn't help us whatsoever. It'll put different thoughts in our minds. But let me get off the soapbox and keep back to the movie. Another thing that Moon Landing, this man, he was kind of smart as well. But something else that Moon Landing talked about, a lost soul is no different than a person who has an obsession. And that was where Joe started to keen in on, because, you know, a lost soul is someone who has let anxiety and certain things overcome them to where they become disconnected from life. Whereas a person who has an obsession, like Joe, on his jazz music and things like that, he becomes disconnected from life because his only focus is trying to make it, is trying to be that jazz singer, trying to do those things. Kind of like a lost soul, because you miss out on on life things. You miss out on starting a family. You miss out on different things because you're so obsessed with trying to make this one thing happen. So that was another message. Being a lost soul and being obsessed about something, one and the same. So in order for Joe to get back to Earth, Moon Landing told him that they had to go through the thinnest part in the universe so that it could open up. But in order for Joe to get back to Earth, he had to actively envision where he was at that moment. And it reminded me of like a guided meditation, to where you close your eyes and someone's speaking certain things into you. They're telling you, what does it smell like? What does it feel like? Can you feel the grass between your toes? Things like that. So Moon Landing was telling him like, where are you now? Can you feel it? What does it feel like? What are people doing? And he started to smell like hand sanitizer. So once he finally envisioned himself and where he was, him and Soul 22 somehow ended up falling into the hole. The cat and Joe ended up being in the hospital. And Joe's whole goal was to kind of get out of the hospital so he can make his gig. But they needed to find Moon Landing so they could switch their souls. Soul 22 could go back to the great before, and Joe could get into his body. So they needed to get out of the hospital. So they finally make it home. But on the way home, Joe runs into Miss Doretha, and she sees him in his hospital gown eating pizza with a cat on his shoulder. And at that point, she like, nah, this man is crazy. He cannot be a part of my band. Nope. So he ends up kind of losing the gig. They finally make it home. The young man, his student who got him the gig, called him and said, hey, just get here really early. Look like $100, get your gig back. He goes home and he like puts on his best suit. He needs a haircut. He needs a lineup or whatever. And this was like the funniest thing ever. The cat hops on the records and tries to cut his hair, and cuts a whole line down the side of this man's head. Hilarious, because who thought like a cat with two hands could give you a lineup? But because of that, okay, now instead of going to see moon landing, now they have to go and get a haircut. He gets to the barber shop and they see his hair and they like, whoa, man, hop in this chair. So his barber that he's had for a long time, and the most conversations he had with this barber is about what? His obsession, jazz. Because Soul 22 is now in the body, and Soul 22 knows nothing about Earth and has been trying to fight the urge to be on Earth so long that the soul is innocent. It knows nothing. It just knows to ask questions. The jaded soul starts to preach the good word to all the people in the barbershop. At some point, by the end of his whole haircut, everybody in the shop is staring at him, talking about like, what is the meaning of life? Like, what does it really mean? Everybody in the barbershop was like, yeah, wow, that's crazy. Like, they were thinking on the same wavelengths. And then at some point, Joe tells Soul 22 prior to them going in that the spark that his barber has is of being a barber because he's so good at it. But when Soul 22 begins to talk to him and ask him questions about himself, the barber, it comes out that the barber always wanted to be a veterinarian. But he could not pursue that dream because his child got sick and he ended up having to pursue another career, which is becoming a barber because it was cheaper than going to veterinary school. And that made Joe think to himself like, wow, I have never asked this man this, and I've been coming to his shop for so long. It also opened up a question to me of, you know, how many switch positions have you made in your career or have you made in your life to where what was it ultimately that you wanted to do, and is it too late for you to pursue that? Do you still have that spark, that longing in your heart to pursue that dream that you never wanted, that you always wanted to? You know, like for me, starting this YouTube channel and just talking about movies because I like watching them, and secondly, just seeing how these new Disney movies are coming about, and for me, I'm getting more out of them than a child watching it, to where it's just enjoyable to me and I'm pulling out these messages. So for me, it's like, wow, you're never too young. It's never too late for you to try something and pretty much pursue your dream that you've always had. So to all of us out here who, you know, thought as a young child we wanted to be a fashion designer, and now we're in our 40s and now we're like, oh, it's too late. No, it's not too late. Who's to say you can't pursue it? You still might need to keep a job, and you still might need to do A, B, C, and D, but who's to say you can't pursue your dream of becoming a fashion designer? Who's to say that you couldn't show a collection somewhere, or show or sell some garments to somebody, or just learn how to sew? As a child, we were always given those clues and keys to things that we ultimately wanted to do. But at some point, as in this movie Soul, where the mom told her son, I always knew you liked jazz, but you needed stability. You needed to be a teacher. You didn't need to pursue these things that weren't feeding your soul. You didn't need to do none of that. You know, a lot of times those things come into our mind to where, hey, I can't pursue this because it won't sustain me. I can't feed my family. I can't feed my children. But who's to say that? Who's to really say that what we really find joy in, what we're really passionate is, can't provide us with stability, with life, with love? You know what I'm saying? Like, we gotta get out of the mindset of just doing stuff just to do it, but do stuff because we love to do it. When Soul 22 was talking to the barber about like what he ultimately wanted to do and what he's doing now, although the barber loves what he does now, he always wanted to be a veterinarian, but he loves being able to talk to people, meet people, and change their life and leave them with a smile, which is ultimately what his purpose in life could have been, even though his passion could have been being a veterinarian. So that's also a question that we look at and we think about, to where our passion and our purpose, are they one and the same? Are they two separate different things? Can they work together? So that's still a question that I have, and still something that I'm trying to explore and figure out as well. So after they left the barber shop, Soul 22 and Joe end up trying to go back to the Half Moon Jazz Club, to where they were going to meet Moon Landing, in order for him to open up the realm and they could go back into the great beyond and the great before, and then they could switch their souls and switch their bodies back. But this soul called Terry, he was the one who counts all the souls, make sure everything is top notch, up to date, and his goal was to find them because he knew that a soul was missing. So he came to Earth to try to figure out where Soul 22 and where Joe were. and he found them and he opened up a realm and he caught both of their souls. So now they're back where they were supposed to be. But the good thing was that because of all of that, Soul 22 was able to find what their spark was, and that last circle ended up filling up while Soul 22 was on Earth. And what was found was that Soul 22 realized what it was like to be on Earth. It wasn't all about the jadedness that she felt, but it was more so about like breathing of the air, experiencing happiness, laughing, taking in the fresh air, just honestly living life. And that is what gave Soul 22 that extra circle to change to Earth. So when they got back to the great before, Soul 22 had the Earth patch on her chest, you know, but her thing was, in order for her to get that patch, that meant that she knew what her passion was, what her spark was, but they couldn't figure it out because it just happened. Just the experience of walking through Joe's life helped to give that spark. But Joe told Soul 22 that no, that spark came because Soul 22 was in his body. And because of that, that spark came from everything that Soul 22 had experienced in Joe's life, versus Soul 22 coming to that understanding on her own. Because Soul 22 wanted to know that spark so bad, but no one could tell her what it was, she threw off the patch and gave it back to Joe so that he can get back to Earth. So Joe hopped back off the cliff, went on back to Earth, hopped in his body, and he made his gig. And he killed the gig, he got in the zone, and he did such a good job. And his mom and his mom's friends end up showing up and coming to support him. So after the gig was over, he stood outside with Miss Doretha, and another powerful moment where he looked at Miss Doretha and he was like, so what's next after this? Because she was impressed with his skills, and she was like, we'll do it all over again tomorrow. And he kind of just stopped and looked, and he was like, I gotta do this all over tomorrow? So she begins to tell him a story about a fish, and how people kept giving the fish water, but the fish wanted the ocean. And it's kind of like you get to that pinnacle of what you've been looking for, but now you want more. My goal, okay, is to get 1,000 subscribers. But now once you got 1,000, I want 100 million. Just live on the coast that you are right now. Just live where you are right now and enjoy it, the process. Enjoy you going to those heights. That was where it finally dawned on Joe that like all that he had worked for all this time equated to this. And it's really just another rat race circle of him versus the passion and the love that he has for it and the recognition he was looking for. Is more so he's just in a circle. So from there, he goes home and he sits at his piano because, you know, he's back in the same situation, back doing the same thing, pretty much not existing. And he takes out of his pocket all the things that Soul 22 had collected along the way during the journey. He begins to kind of write a song or play a song on the piano that puts him back in the zone, that takes him back to the zone in the great before, to where now he gets to see Moon Landing again. And Moon Landing tells him that Soul 22 is now a lost soul because she got so overwhelmed with trying to figure out what her purpose, what her spark in life was supposed to be, that it was just overtaking her. And so they finally found Soul 22 had turned into a monster because she just was lost. So once Soul 22 let Joe into her head, and that's another time to where it was so powerful, because once Joe got into her head, he saw all the negative thoughts that she was telling herself. He saw like all the sayings that she was saying, the unworthiness, and then even to the point to where when he told her like she didn't know her spark only came from him because she was living his life. And that made me think just in general about how our mind is so powerful. How if someone told you negative things every day, all day, then that's the only thing that you could believe in. You can never reach any heights because you kept believing that negativity. But if you started to fill your mind with all the positive thoughts, with all the positive things throughout the day, of course, each day isn't going to be great or the best thing ever, but if you keep thinking about those positive things, thinking about the greatness that is happening in your life, how much better could your life be? Because those negative thoughts were just holding her down. And then sometimes, like in Joe's case, he projected on her, and that projection made it become a belief to her. How many times do people self-project on you what their fears and anxieties are, i.e. parents, what their fears and anxieties are about life and stuff that they weren't able to accomplish, so they don't want you to fall down the same rabbit hole, but yet we all gotta feel at something, and we all gotta find what gives us that passion. But our parents can't project those fears on us. And so I just love this scene in the movie where Soul 22 was just in her head, in all the negative thoughts. And that's when Joe got to see like how he contributed to those negative thoughts, but how he can also bring her out. Because he brought her out, and in bringing her out, it helped her become a better soul, and it helped him become someone who was no longer existing in life, but actually living life. So at that point, Soul 22 was ultimately just afraid to live life, ultimately afraid to fail, because they had been in the great before so long, and so many other souls, so many other trainers had told her that she wasn't worthy, that she wasn't capable of doing certain things, that she would never amount to anything, she would never make it on earth. So she just consistently believed that. And then the one person that she liked, that opened her up, that she wanted to help, begin to tell her the same thing, then it does make you feel like, what's the purpose of me living life when I'm not going to equate to anything and I'm not going to do nothing? When Joe was able to bring her back to what she felt on earth, then that spark came back and she was able to calm down. At that point, another good point that, you know, was for adults as well is like, what is holding us back in our minds? What things are we telling ourselves or letting other people tell us that is keeping us stagnant and stuck where we are? What is something that can bring us back to center, bring us back to whole, bring us back to just living life? Because everything doesn't have to be about money. Everything doesn't have to be about getting to the next level. But honestly, it could just be about looking at the joy and the sun of the day. Like right now, I'm just looking outside and it's a beautiful day, and just saying thank you, God, for just this gorgeous day. You know, like just the small things that we forget about every day because we're so in a cycle. Some of us may be parents, some of us may have really tough careers, and we can't find the joy in a lot of different things. But just taking a step back and looking at those things that we can take joy in, as well as not letting our negative thoughts take over everything in our life, because it will make us disconnected. We will become a lost soul, and we will just be coexisting in life until the day we do die. So this movie was super, super powerful to me. It has so many messages, and hopefully you guys took something from this video as well, because I took so much from the movie, and I'm definitely going to check it out again whenever I'm feeling low or down or lost, disconnected from life. It is a movie that I want to pick up and watch. The animation was really good. The jazz was really good. The music was mesmerizing. And then lastly, the only question that I have was, maybe I have to watch it again, but just figure out, did Joe actually find his purpose in life? Because to me, the purpose could have been him helping students reach their highest potential, and him just finally understanding that he is great at what he does as being a jazz musician, but he's also a great human being as well. But honestly, that's the end of the review of Soul by Disney Pixar with Jamie Foxx as Joe Gardner. And again, this is Popcorn and Slush movie review with me, Jasmine. Have a good one. Bye-bye.